So the first Ulster Unionist Convention with Irish language proudly on its walls. Common Gaelic na Haglisha is the Irish Guild of the Church